So we look at what purpose does that problem behavior provide for this person. So the LSSP and I that I work with, we tend to engage in, how can I say, like insightful, clarifying informations. Because of course there's my discipline that I come from, and then there's hers. And so y'all LSSPs, y'all come in. So for us, and even many behavior analysts, when we are working with someone who's engaging in problem behaviors, sometimes I want to die when I hear, well, he's engaging in that for sensory reasons. Ooh, I was only in there with him for 20 minutes, and I could see that that was a socially mediated response. I'm like, where? So my LSSP and I said, you know what? I think outside of the behavior analytic community, there's different definitions for sensory. Because for us, when we define sensory-based, or what we call automatic reinforcement behaviors, we're looking at behaviors that cannot be predicted, that occur in multiple conditions, in the presence of people and in the absence of people, right? And so that's how can we call those automatic behaviors. So I'll give you examples of what we refer to when we're like looking at sensory-based behaviors, right, or automatic behaviors. And I even shared with her, even for me as a behavior analyst, those are the toughest to work with, right? I had an adult client a couple years ago, and that's what she was getting referred for, right? Because I was like, okay, it was a disruptive behavior. So I get there, man, I just slouched. I was like, that's gonna be tough, right? Hand mouthing, so much so that the saliva was just dripping from her elbows, right? The skin was even already starting to get the redness from the constant hand mouthing, right? It didn't occur like predictably in social situations, right? Like especially if we look at like transitions, task demands, it happened across all the time. And that's how I had to explain it to like our LSSP, how we evaluate sensory-based behaviors, is that these are those behaviors that they don't need the presence of someone else to give themselves that reinforcement, right? They don't need someone to present a task demand to them to start engaging in the hand mouth, right? That's why when you do, like for us, if we do an analysis on those types of behaviors, they occur across all those conditions. Even more importantly, they will still occur when they're alone, meaning it's not without a social predication, right? So that's how we separate. So you'll very rarely hear us say like, oh, it's sensory-based. We're very like, let's wait, because if I see social conditions for your problem behaviors, that does not meet our criteria for how we define behaviors with an automatic function. Does that make sense? Okay, so we're looking, typically what I see, where do you think the majority of our behaviors come? That have a social function or an automatic function? Social. That means too, we're a big part of it too. Okay, so we'll see that problem behavior can either get that person attention, it could get them access to tangibles. Problem behavior might allow one to delay, avoid, or escape, right? All those multiple situations. Problem behavior might be pleasurable, right? This is where we get into, or automatically reinforcing, such as various forms of stereotypies. So these are all your stereotypies, right? Those kids that flap, those kids that engage in the vocal stereotypies that just go on and on all day, like when you hear those individuals, right? That's where you'll know, like automatic behaviors can be easily spotted. Positive behaviors may not always achieve the same result as the problem behavior, and there's a reason for that, right? There are some individuals who do engage in the appropriate behaviors, but they don't do it enough, right? And there's reasons for that. So we'll talk about the principles of ABA and how they exist in our environment. They're probably on a there's a long delay before they contact reinforcement. So there's issues with that, or they're contacting extinction, right? They're not getting any reinforcement for when they do present those and engage in that positive behavior, but guess where they get that reinforcement? Well, then I guess I'll just default to my problem behavior because that's effective, right? Or the individual does not have the alternative skills to achieve the same result as a problem behavior. So we're going to get into, this is something that you can do on the fly. You can do this in the moment. You don't need to be a behavior analyst to do this. You just need to know this is what you need to start looking for when you're working with an individual who engages in problem behavior. You need to look at the antecedent event, right? That means what was happening right before they started engaging in that problem behavior. This is really, really important. So when I get to a crisis situation, and I am immediately asking, no matter what they're doing to destroy the room or attack the staff, what happened right before this? Well, we told him he needed to do his social studies assignment. And we gave him his 3 worksheets with his book. Okay, that's all I needed to know. Because we're going to work first in getting those problem behaviors down and help him de-escalate. But I need to know what that preceding event was prior to. Because that already tells me there's a social condition there, right? There was a person present who presented a task, mind you, probably a large task, and now he's going to engage in these problem behaviors, right? So we can already start working, right? And so now the consequence is, then I go and tell him, so how did you respond? The moment that he scratched through or he ripped the papers up, I told him he could take a break. Okay, that's all I needed to know. That's the consequence, right? He contacted some form of reinforcement now after following him engaging in that problem behavior. ABCs, they're not just specific for problem behaviors. You use them also. You can use an ABC analysis also for appropriate behaviors. Like, why is it working for this particular behavior, but then not this one, right? You can use ABCs, can be done everywhere, even for yourself. So again, there's just the definitions for each one. The antecedents are always the events before. The behavior is what they engage in. And then, of course, the consequence, right? The events or interactions which occur immediately following the behavior. What the individual obtains or avoids, right? Because they're either putting something into their environment or their problem behaviors are effective at removing something from their environment. That's what we're looking at, one of those two things. Everybody with me? Okay. We're doing this kind of quick. There's a lot of slides we need to get through. So, again, just a quick, where do you think for us as behavior analysts, where we focus? Where do we place our major emphasis when we're analyzing problem behaviors? What happens before and how people are responding after, right? Where do most people concentrate their efforts? On the behavior. Not effective. Because for me, problem behavior is problem behavior. I could care less if they're spitting, they're hair pulling, they're biting, they're kicking, they're throwing chairs, they're destroying the room, because I can't do anything if I don't have the information on the events that occur prior to it, and I don't have information from the events that occur after. It's absolutely useless for me. And yes, sometimes I do. I want to pull my hair out when that's all I get. It's just the form, right? What they do. And I'm like, I get it, right? The only thing I will say that maybe one thing that I will utilize when I'm getting information on the actual problem behavior is if there's a chain of reactions, right? Because sometimes they will give you those signals that they're going to start engaging in that problem behavior, right? So like with some students, they may start engaging in those vocal protests, right? And that's usually like, oh, there's your sign. He's agitated and it's going to go up from here. He's going to start ripping up all his teaching materials that are in front of him. And if we get near him, he'll start scratching us or pulling our hair. So that is important in that sense, but I do not, my emphasis is not on the actual form of the behavior that the individual engages in. It's the antecedent and the consequence. Because of the consequence, especially what's important here, because the antecedents, that tells me what I need to manipulate and how I need to provide the supports so that it minimizes his reason to engage in problem behavior. But the consequence, what's really important for me, is how often has this guy been winning with how people have been responding to him, especially under social conditions, right? Because escape, the function of escape is a social condition. We're part of that. Tangible function, that's a social condition. We're part of that. Attention, the function of attention is a social condition. We're part of that. So if that problem behavior has gained any value for that person and it's been effective, we've been part of contributing to the value of that problem behavior, especially under those three conditions. Does that make sense? Okay. It's not a bad thing. but it also means, is that individual the only person going through behavior change too? Mm-mm. And sometimes it's a lot tougher for the people in the environment to change their behavior and how they respond. Okay, so we're going to change behaviors by manipulating the antecedents and the consequences. That BX is just my shorthand for behavior, right? The events prior to the behavior, the events after behavior. By manipulating, we're going to manipulate the antecedents, we're going to manipulate consequence. And just so you know, too, in the behavior analyst world, when we refer to consequences, that is both positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement, right? Or positive punishment, negative punishment. Those are very technical, but we're not going to get into that. But just even, it's the good and the bad. That's even how I'm raising my little ones. You want positive consequences or negative consequences? Because there's a consequence to every action. And so just so you know, when I refer to consequences, it's the good stuff too. We want positive consequences, especially when we're teaching the replacing behaviors. So again, in our field, this is pretty much, now sometimes you'll see a combination of these, but typically we can pretty much identify when we're assessing, the function of that problem behavior. This is the why that person's engaging in that problem behavior. Are they doing it to obtain escape? Are they doing it to obtain attention? Are they doing it for automatic purposes like the sensory? Or is it a tangible function? And some of the individuals, like my higher functioning individuals, you'll see it's a combination of both, right? They'll engage in problem behaviors for both escape and tangible. Or you'll see that they engage in problem behaviors for both escape and attention. Because especially in the school setting, when someone is blowing up, I love that. You think that they keep it really calm and minimal in the staff that respond to that person in a school setting? You're laughing here. Mm-mm. They treat it like a 5-alarm fire. And, for me, I come home whoa! I remember when I first started, and of course they put me, right away, Ms. Guffey, we need you right away. We have a student that was engaging in pretty severe challenging behavior, and he gave us the whole gamut, right? Very severe physical aggression, severe property destruction, and that was pretty much it. Those were the two things. And his severe physical aggression was the hitting. Hit me a few times in the face, definite, and he's about, 5'8", 5'9", so the hair pulls were significant. Not one fisted, both, two. So there were many times he had me dragging, probably about a good 6 to 8 feet by my hair. What else? The severe property destruction, he would go, you talk about like your standard 4-foot bookcase. He could go and break all the shelves down, throwing all the books out, getting big printers, slamming them to the floor. So, this is very severe problem behaviors. And I remember when I first got there were like 8 staff working with him. I was blown away. I was just shocked to see that amount of response to that individual. And then, of course, too, all this. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my gosh. Very rarely will you hear behavior analysts talking that much, especially in crisis. And so very quickly, I had to, and mind you, I'm in my flats, I'm in clothes that I can move in, but I'm like, you need to leave, you need to leave, you need to leave. And of course, they're looking at me in shock, right? Who's this little lady coming in here and she's gonna take on this big boy? But I'm like, oh yeah, and I said, you the teacher? She's like, yep, you're staying. You the assistant? Yep, you're staying. Us 3 are here, we're gonna stay here, everybody else. And of course the men, they wanna be helpful, they're knights in shining armor. It was hard for them to leave, to get out of the room. And so I did work with that too, and I said, okay, if we really need you, would you feel okay then just step outside of the classroom then? Wait in the hallway. But do not wait through the window of the door where he can see you. Just, we'll call for you if we really need you. And it was really uncomfortable for him to get, and at this point too, because I'm trying so hard to get he already had me in my hair. So I was like, that wouldn't have happened if y'all had listened to me the first time, right? So I'm like, we need to work on instructional control with the staff too. But we finally get him out. And of course, the severity of the problem behavior is going up. The teachers are still doing a lot of this. And I think too, when you complete your education programs, all the trainings that are required to become a teacher, I think they teach you that is the only mode of teaching. And I'm just like, shh, in crisis? They're not even hearing us anymore. And there are multiple modes of communication. You can write to him, right? A form of transcription, whatever it is that you need to direct him to. You can use gestures. Or if he is escalated so high, stop talking. He can't hear you anyway. So that was hard too, for me to kind of, down. I mean, we can wait. We have all day. I'm like, it's only 9 o'clock. We have all day. And just forget that assignment, because we're not getting to that right now, right? I mean, y'all are laughing, but it's true. It's like, whoa, that is not the only way to teach. Stop talking, right? We'll get to, but you'll see, when I started working with this individual, I had to because I'm going to figure out your number, because you're doing a lot here. You got all these people worked up, because I need to get them to start calming down too, because they're treating you like a 5-alarm fire, and that's not going to happen. But one of the biggest things too that I saw was that increase of presence of people, the increase of voices and instructions that he was getting from all those people. It was escalating him. And I was like, that also we cannot do. That is not an effective means of support for this individual when he's reached that level. And I need to get them to come down and work with this individual, matching the supports to his need. And that amount of people is not what he needs, right? So we'll get to, but yeah, he actually, I think because he was the first one that was given to me, he's now become I refer to him as my sweetheart. So one of the things that I try to help my staff with is when you are looking at problem behavior, whether you're at the grocery store or in your school setting, get in the practice. And I always try to tell them, think of just the basic 4, right? Because there are more complex forms of functions for problem behavior, but typically this is what you can almost narrow it down to. Just tell yourself EAST, right? That's the acronym we'll use, right? Escape, attention, sensory, tangible. And sometimes it's a combination of those two. So like with your higher functioning individuals, you'll see it's a combination of escape and tangible, or it's a combination of escape and attention. But just kind of like something to reference, and again, when you're in that moment, very easy. EAST, what category, what function is that problem behavior looking like? Is that pretty easy for most of you all to remember?